Okay. Thanks for the intro, Kandu. Welcome, Vitalik. ¿Cómo está tu español?
Puedo comprender mucho, pero no puedo comprender todo. Creo que en esta introducción muy buena comprendí quizás 60 o 70%. Sí, pero puedo comer en los restaurantes sin problemas, pero sí, tengo que explicar las cadenas de bloques o la prueba de trabajo o, ¿cómo se dice? Proof of stake. Sí, es un poco más difícil.
Bien. Something I always wonder about, like you speak multiple languages. Did that have any influence or relate somehow to the fact that you build a protocol with a decentralized nature? Like you're a person who likes to travel, to visit different countries. Is there a relationship between the two, or is just correlation without causation?
I'm sure they're all connected to each other.
That's good. Okay, well, let's go back 10 years when you first created Ethereum. I'm curious about what was missing from Bitcoin that made you create Ethereum. And I'm not looking for programmability as an answer. I'm looking for the specific thing that you wanted to build that Bitcoin didn't let you.
Yeah, I think one of the specific things that I remember being excited about was DAOs, right? Decentralized autonomous organizations. This was this idea that you could basically take the logic, like the rules of how something like a company or some other organization works, and you can put those rules on the blockchain, and you can have like some kind of company or some other kind of organization like actually run entirely on chain. And I remember, I was excited about many different things, right? Like if you read the Ethereum white paper, there's like 10 or 15 different examples, but if I had to pick one, I think that was it. And I remember, like back then there were like protocols like BitShares that was trying, back then Dan Larimer, he used DAC as decentralized autonomous corporations, and he was basically saying, like, let's make a separate blockchain for each DAC. And I had this idea that, like, actually they could be more secure and, like, more trusted and interoperate better if, like, we actually had one blockchain that could support all of these things as programs on top of them. So, yeah, and I think like, if there was one single thing, it would be that.
Actually, that's a good segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you. Like, if this was the use case you were targeting, why build a general programmable platform as opposed to something specific for this use case? What prompted you go to the extra mile and build a blockchain where you could run anything?
So right before I started Ethereum, I was working at Colored Coins and Mastercoin. There were some of these protocols that were starting to do these like more complicated applications on top of Ethereum. But then I noticed a problem, which is that people would constantly come up with some new thing that they wanted to do. And I saw that like if you did that on top of these protocols, like these protocols would have to change and add a new feature every time someone wants to do some kind of new thing. And so I realized that like if you want to make it truly permissionless for people to invent and to do new things, you would have to like actually make something that's general purpose that like has this programmability, so that if you do come up with something new or and like even like within DAOs, there's like so many different ways to construct one. There's so many different governance mechanisms you can have, so many different things that they can do. That like if you don't want to have to keep changing the blockchain every week, like you just have to make a general purpose.
And I guess you're absolutely right on that one. Back then, when you first launched Ethereum 10 years ago, like, what did you think that was going to happen 10 years later? Like, what was in your mind that would happen at the point in time where we're now, and how much have we drifted from that?
I really did not know. I remember when I first started Ethereum, like just writing the white paper at the beginning, like I really expected this would be a fairly small project, like we would finish it within a few months and then go back to university. And so I think we really underestimated, both the complexity of actually building something like this and how much impact it would eventually have.
Makes sense. I'm curious, like if not talking about the technical side of things, but more the cultural side of things. Do you feel like the spirit, the culture, the ethos that makes Ethereum what it is today was the same back then? Did it change during these 10 years? Have you changed your mind about how you see Ethereum?
I mean, I think obviously the culture of the crypto space has changed a huge amount over the last 10 years in, all kinds of directions, right? And like some of them I like, some of them I'm also critical of. And the biggest change I think was like 10 years ago, people did not really, one is like people did not really know exactly what they're building, and the technology was not really ready. And so we saw a lot of experimentation, a lot of prototypes, a lot of things backed by like future promises and future potential, but not really something that could actually like have a big real world impact at scale. I mean, obviously, except for the store of value use case, that one was the most successful, the first. And now technology is much more mature. People are doing a lot more things. But then, I also sometimes like miss the spirit of exploration that the space had earlier on. Like I think there's definitely a big part of the space that's kind of gone too much in the direction that we understand DeFi, we understand meme coins, we understand 50x leverage trading, and we even understand ENS, and there's basically if you want to succeed, you just like be a fast follower and like copy a category that's already proven, and like I see why you would want to do that from a like just risk aversion perspective, but I think it also does kind of harm the imagination of the space, and like I think it would be nice if we also went back to like people trying to create decentralized Uber, people trying to create totally different kinds of companies so that engage contributors in totally different ways. And I think some of the new technologies that we're including, like especially things like ZK, they can help a lot because like they're actually, it's introducing a whole new dimension of capability, and with that, I think there's a whole new dimension of things that like you can explore and things that you can like actually make happen, right? Like if we look at even things like DAOs, right? In countries, even in companies, like everywhere, like decision making is not fully transparent. And sometimes that's a problem, right? But sometimes there's very good reasons for this. Like you do not want every single person's vote to be public, right? And this is something that blockchains were not really capable of doing. And so we saw these DAOs, right? And like on these DAOs, all of the votes are public. And then like a lot of people complain about DAOs, right? And I think especially about a few, like at the beginning of the year, there was this like peak of disillusionment where a lot of people gave up on DAOs. And there were many complaints, but one of the complaints is like every vote is transparent, and so the whole thing just turns into like a big social game, and like everyone is like follows along, like the powerful and cool people, and everyone's afraid of going against them, and it just becomes not very interesting. And if you add privacy back into voting, which like projects like Aragon, for example, are actually doing, and other projects as well, then like you can actually fix some of those problems, right? And so when there's this new wave of technology, and even when existing technologies are improving, like how Ethereum is scaling quite a bit, and it's scaling, I mean, both, L1 and L2. And like the nice thing about the L2s, right, is that, even if, you personally don't like any of the L2s, the fact that more activity is happening there actually means that more space is free on L1, right? And it's actually like extremely cheap to send, Ethereum transactions now, right? And then scalability will go up another, like 10x, I think, pretty soon. And so that also opens up new possibilities for what to build. And so, and then also, user experience and security and like Web3, Web2 integration. And so a lot of ideas that people kind of tried and then gave up on, like I think it makes sense to really try to bring many of them back.
And I think you're speaking to the right crowd here with a lot of enthusiastic people who want to jump into the space. I want to go back to privacy for a second. I've been working on that for a couple of years, so it's something I'm interested in. Like you mentioned that early on, like privacy was not built in many of the projects, many of the platforms. Do you think it was just a technical limitation, or was there something else?
I think technical limitation. I think had zero-knowledge proofs existed at like the current level of quality, I think Ethereum would have had them from the beginning. But you do have to remember, right? Like the technology was what I remember was 6 months before Ethereum started, there was this big Bitcoin conference in San Jose, right? At that, like this was the first Bitcoin conference of like any significant size, right? And I remember going there. I remember being really inspired, and I remember the conference really convinced me that like the space is actually real, that it's not just people talking to each other on the internet, that there's like many hundreds of people that have joined big Bitcoin companies, that have lots of people pouring their lives into it, lots of people making real startups and real products. And I also remember there were the people from Starkware, I mean, like Eli Ben-Sasson and a few others, and they were making a presentation on some of the very first zero-knowledge proof protocols, right? So there were two, I remember, right? There was the work on zero cash, right? This was Zcash, of course, is what uses a later version, or used a later version of the zero cash protocol, right? And then since then, they replaced the entire technology stack with something much better. And zero cash was like the very first, theoretically usable protocol for these zero-knowledge proofs. And the second was SCIP, right? This was what Starks were called before they were Starks, succinct computational integrity and privacy. And even with Zcash, so like 3 years after that, it took two minutes to sign a transaction on a big laptop. And on a phone, it was impossible, right? Yeah. And so if you fast forward to today you need, like on a laptop, like less than 1 second to generate a proof. Yeah. And then on a phone, it's like 2 or 3 seconds, right? And and even those numbers, they're going down very quickly, right? Yeah. And then also for a developer experience, right? Like before 2020, if you want to make your own zk-Stark application, like you have to personally be a cryptographer. You have to personally understand the details of all of these different spaces and like how elliptic curves work. And then we have Circom, and then we also have Noir. We have many things now. And so for a developer, the experience is much easier.
Like I know that you're pushing for a lot of efforts for adding privacy to Ethereum, but if you had to redesign Ethereum from scratch, how would that look like? Well, in terms of privacy, I'm asking.
Yeah, I feel like I have, like a bunch of different answers and to how I would redesign Ethereum in general. And like actually, I think the lean Ethereum roadmap that exists right now, like already incorporates a lot of them. One of the big questions is, should Ethereum should Ethereum actually have like explicit privacy features on the L1, or should Ethereum just do programmability and then like basically be sort of fully application agnostic? And I see arguments for both of these, right? I think because even if Ethereum does not have privacy as like a protocol feature, you could still have a lot of privacy on Ethereum, right? Yeah. Like 2 days ago, we announced Kohaku, and like you can have wallets with privacy built in. And then if you use Kohaku, you basically get an experience of sending private transactions that's not fundamentally not different from what you would get in something like Zcash, right? And but then the benefit of putting that kind of support directly into the protocol is you get much larger anonymity sets, right? So what an anonymity set is, it's like if you have some kind of privacy protocol. And like, this is not even just about coins, right? This even applies to like VPNs, like privacy on the internet, anything. But then only 1,000 other people are using that protocol. Then if someone sees that some message was sent using that protocol, then they already know that there's only 1,000 people that could have sent it, right? And then you can only add in, like, you just add in a few other bits of information, like, oh, these 3 messages were sent by the same person, and then you look at the time zone, and like these people were awake, you look at the language, and then like you narrow it down, and it's like, it's very easy to determine exactly who did any particular thing, right? And so the only way around that attack is to have like a larger base of users, right? And so if like Ethereum had much more privacy, like baked in as a protocol feature, then basically the number of users by default would be like every Ethereum user. But then the downside is basically that your security becomes much more dependent on the technology in like a really scary way, right? Because if there is a bug in the ZK snark mechanism, then basically anyone has the ability to secretly print an unlimited amount of ETH.
You're thinking about the Zcash inflation back.
Exactly. They can basically hyperinflate Ethereum, and the problem is like you can't even revert because no one knows when the attack started. And so, but if you have these like second level protocols, like if there is a bug in Railgun, then only Railgun users will lose money, right? And so it's like much more contained. And so to me, it's like a question of technological maturity, right? Like the more mature technology gets, the more okay we are with trusting it for more and more things. And so I think over time, like it will make sense to make Ethereum a default in more and more places. Like eventually, I think the privacy at all one kind of EIPs make sense. And I mean, even like things like like our effort around wallets is like a big intermediate step, right? Because we're going from saying privacy requires a dedicated wallet to saying privacy is default at the wallet level. And then the step after that, which could take years, but that's fine, is privacy being a default at the protocol level, right? And so, I think it's like a matter of just being responsible and like understanding, like which stage you're at in terms of risk and like being more and more comfortable over time.
I have so many follow-up questions. You mentioned maturity, and well, ossification has been a word that has been thrown around, especially on Ethereum in the later stages. My question is, how confident do you feel around ossification, given that we don't know what we will know at that point in time? Like right now we're saying, okay, with everything we have learned these past 10 years, we think that making this set of changes and then ossifying will be good. But how do you know that you won't learn new things in the next 3-4 years that will make you keep pushing ossification back?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like ossification is also not a binary thing, right? True. And like we can be more like ossifying the consensus layer and ossifying the EVM are different things. Like, you can ossify a virtual machine before you ossify the consensus. I think the mentality that like I've had is that like I think more and more ossification over time is good for Ethereum.
Okay.
And I do think that like we have a much lower like rate of surprises now than we did like before, right? Like at the start of Ethereum, we did not know any, like I remember the blog post I wrote on proof of stake in January 2014, and in that blog post, like I was hedging because I had no idea if proof of stake could even be made secure, right? And so then 5 years later, we knew that theoretically ZK would change a lot of things, but then we had no idea when ZK would come, right? And now we know a lot about like what ZK looks like, and even like what kinds, like how efficient it is and how efficient it is in different situations. Maybe the one thing we don't know much about is obfuscation, and so, like, it's still good to maintain some flexibility. And then on the consensus algorithm side, we know what kind of optimal 2-round protocols look like, where we know what optimal 1-round protocols look like. Like, the difference between, like, the theoretical like optimum that we know that it's not possible to be faster than, and the thing that we know how to build as like less than a factor of 5 probably. And so, yeah, like it's one of these like things where sort of you don't want to like do it too early, but at the same time, like as Ethereum gets more and more mature, the problem is if the protocol keeps changing quickly, right? Then like that itself, like it concentrates political authority, like it concentrates power in this governance body that it keeps on deciding some pretty significant changes, and so that's also not a thing that you want. So I'm I'm in favor of basically the roadmap we described yesterday, right? Where like we do the short-term scaling things that we already know. We do the lean roadmap that we already know the things, but we don't necessarily know every detail in some cases. But we also know like if nothing new got discovered, like what we would stop at. And then after that point, I think it would be healthy to start moving attention off of the L1 and start moving attention to some of the more surrounding infrastructure, which like we have been doing already, right? Yeah, and so I think continuing that trend is a healthy thing.
But surrounding infra, you mean Swarm, Whisper?
Swarm and Whisper is one example. Zero knowledge proof related things, user level stuff like making more secure wallets, making more secure light clients. Privacy infrastructure, like in 5 years, if we think about it in this kind of very pragmatic perspective of like the Ethereum Foundation has a budget of this number of dollars. This is where the Ethereum L1 is now. This is what we could accomplish by making Ethereum L1 even better, versus this is what we could accomplish by making the best possible infrastructure on the user level, maximizing user privacy, possibly even putting some into more secure operating systems. There will come a point, right, where the low-hanging fruit are not over here, the low-hanging fruit are over here. And so to me, that's kind of the big reason why, I think short-term, this attention on doing, this big set of changes to L1 is good. But then, over time, the application layer is where more and more attention needs to shift to. And that's where this year, a lot of things have already started.
Since you have touched on a lot of different parts of the stack, a friend of mine told me the other day that in mathematics, it said that Euler was the last mathematician that actually managed to get a grasp on everything that was happening. Maybe because he was really prolific, I don't know, but math hadn't advanced that much so that a single person could still cover all ground. How do you feel about crypto? Like crypto moves at incredibly fast. Do you can still keep a grasp on everything that's happening, or are you starting to have some blanks around certain areas?
It's definitely more difficult than before, but actually not by much, right? Because this is the thing that I've noticed is as these algorithms progress, I think sometimes they get more complicated, but also sometimes they get simpler, right? Sometimes the complexity is just the discovery process, right? And then sometimes optimization is simplification. I could give one example, right? Elliptic curves, and especially elliptic curve pairings. Elliptic curve pairings are crazy complicated. Elliptic curve pairings are the one thing where even though I personally wrote an article about how they work, and even though I personally implemented them, I have no idea how they work. And
now I feel less bad. Okay.
Yeah, but then what's happening more recently is because I think a big part of it is because of quantum resistance. And Scott Aronson, this longtime quantum researcher, wrote an article where now I think he literally said he thinks there's a substantial probability that we'll have quantum computers running Shor's algorithm, which can break elliptic curves in RSA before the next U.S. presidential election, which is a scary timeline if that's true. And so elliptic curves are going to die, right? That's I mean, obviously quantum computers are unknown, like still, they could come in 4 years, they could come in 40 years, they could come in 400 years, but like the things that I've lately been hearing are like, you know, it's starting to be more on I mean, I don't want to say, you know, like use the label as optimistic and pessimistic because these are like very double-edged swords, right? It's like, I mean, not as bad as nuclear, but it's like nuclear, you know, you get the power plants and the weapons, and like here, you know, with quantum, like you get, you know, you get these more efficient search algorithms, possible, you know, like more efficient AI and a bunch of things, but on the other hand, like they just like sweep away about like half of all the cryptography that we use today, right? And the good news is that we can adapt to it, right? The bad, like it is a lot of work, and then also the newer things are, sometimes they are less efficient, like lattices are less efficient than elliptic curves, though sometimes it's more efficient, like people are moving from snarks to starks even today, right? Because starks are actually much faster to generate than elliptic curve proofs. And yeah, so like basically, you know, like as a result of all of these shifts, it looks like the amount of mathematical backgrounds that you need to understand all of cryptography, it might actually reduce, which is, you know, really cool. Like, it makes me happy, right? I think to me, a bit, like a dimension of Ethereum's decentralization that people forget often is like the number of people who can understand either any individual piece of the protocol or even the number of people who can understand the whole protocol, right? And you know, there is kind of the sort of pragmatic mindset that like, oh, that doesn't matter, like as long as different pieces are understood by different people, like you know, like this is how society progresses and it gets more complex. But then, I can see that, but then I also like I really you know, feel and like see the value of kind of Robert Heinlein's approach, where he said, like he famously said, specialization is for insects. So you know, like I think people being able to understand like all of Ethereum on a technical level is, you know, part of Ethereum's decentralization too, and like lean Ethereum really cutting down the assumptions and like making everything based around the same type of hash is like actually something that excites me in that way.
That's good to know, yeah, and it's very, very, very clear, very apparent on the Lean Ethereum roadmap that's the direction. I feel like I need another hour just to ask you about on-chain democratic elections and simplification and who can audit, but we don't have that time, so I want to shift gears with the last minute we have. I had so many more questions I wanted to ask, but never mind.
Una pregunta para usted.
Por favor.
¿Cómo se dice proof of stake en español?
It's an excellent question. I always say it in English because I honestly don't know how to say it in Spanish. Most technical terms we say in English. Prueba de churrasco podría decir. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, honestly I don't know, and I'll look it up. Promise.
Okay.
Last 10 seconds for all the people new here to the ecosystem. Any tips on how to make the most out of this week?
I think, I mean, it all depends on, you know, like what your kind of position is, you know, like what your personal skills are. But I would say, like, try to like ask yourself the question. Actually, this like I remember this was someone gave me this prompt, and it just like inspired me to really get into Bitcoin. Like, don't like ask yourself the question, not just you know, like what have you learned this week, but also like what is one way that you can actually become part of this community and and actively contribute to this ecosystem. I remember back in 2011, the way that I started was I started going through the Bitcoin forums, and I found a Bitcoin job. I found someone was writing a magazine called Bitcoin Weekly, and they was paying Bitcoin for people to write articles for the magazine. And it was like a very small start, but from there I learned more, and then eventually I got into programming. I understood Bitcoin more deeply, and you know, eventually did Ethereum 2.5 years later, right? And then so I think for anyone here, like think about that question of like what is you know, like something that you can do to become a much more active part of the ecosystem, and like listen to, you know, the presentations, and you know, like talk to people and see the exhibitions with that in mind, and I think like many of you will come out with a very good answer.
Absolutely, thank you. And you were also mentioning about all the extra infrastructure being built about Ethereum, around Ethereum, all the new progresses, and we're still early on those. Like there is still plenty of room for innovation. I think that people new to the ecosystem can thrive there and push things forward.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vitalik.